Hey there, and welcome to That Independent Streak. I'm Wendy Campbell, and this is the place. It's all about the things: health, wellness, travel, relationships. As a former rec radio personality, I found that I was kind of missing the connection to people in the global community and wanted to sit down and talk it out again. Part personal therapy, part community enrichment. I hope you enjoy it too. It seems like in life that change is inevitable, that just as you start to feel the flow, the universe steps in to shift the wind to push you in another direction, causing immediate discomfort and new growth opportunities. My guest today has lived 100 lives. A virtual human phoenix, if you will. School at the Citadel, where he played NCAA basketball, then off to the marketing department at Wendy's corporate, a few crisscrossing moves across the country, a pivot to police officer and SWAT hostage negotiator, and then, seemingly out of nowhere in 2012, he was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. But did he stop? Of course not. And that's why he's here today. The author of Sustainable Excellence 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. Terry Tucker is part superhuman, part motivational speaker, and mostly one of the strongest people I've ever met. We discuss his story, his thoughts, his headspace, how he developed his resiliency, and so much more. And I think, honestly, the timing of this conversation is really great, given the fact that there seems to be a lot of shifting wind. There's increasing challenges around every corner. Feels like God, the universe, and whatever you want to call it, wants a little growth push for us all. So Terry's the perfect person to lay that foundation, to really put all of the right mindsets in place. And I'm really excited for you to hear our conversation. I'd love to hear how it affects you. Uncommon and extraordinary, Terry Tucker. Terry.
Wendy, how you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you this morning?
I'm great. No complaints. No complaints at all.
I'll be honest with you. If I had realized that you were in Denver, we probably could have done this in person. But I mean, here we are.
Are you in Denver as well?
I am, in fact, in Denver. Yeah.
Where in Denver?
I'm in Westminster.
Okay, I'm in Lakewood.
Okay, that's close enough.
But I mean, it's so funny. I did a podcast on Wednesday with two young guys, two entrepreneurs, and they're like, "Can you come to our location?" And I'm like, "Well, building was built in the '70s, so I'm in a wheelchair. It's not handicap
right.
accessible." We ended up doing the podcast in the parking lot.
Oh, that's fun. That's new and different.
Never done this before, so what the heck?
Not sure about sound quality management, but that's fun. That's fun.
Yeah, it was bad when the guy across the street started cutting his grass,
I mean, it makes it interesting, right?
It does.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you joined me today. I have so many questions for you, and there's so many different directions that we can take this for sure. But typically, I like to start, and rather than read off your resume, I like to give you an opportunity to tell your story. I think that the stories are really kind of where you get to the heart of things. So, yeah, give us the story. I know you've got the book, and we'll talk about the book. We'll get to the book for sure. But you have got quite the resume and quite the past, and it would be unjust for me to do it for you. So.
Well, I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version because I'm old and I don't want to take up all the
Fair
time.
enough. ADD
So,
kicks in.
yeah, I was born on the south side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and actually went to college at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people
I remember
find
those days.
employment. I was lucky. My first job was in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's. Then I switched to hospital administration. And then I made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did in my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. After that, I started my own school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball, became an author in 2020. But for the last 11 and a half years now, I've been fighting this rare form of cancer, this rare form of melanoma. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Oh, I love the Space Force. That alone is something we could spend an entire hour talking about. But when you talk about going through all of the things that you've been through, you very casually throw in, the cancer. You very casually throw in, I was a hostage negotiator. Oh, and I did marketing at Wendy's. I mean, it's I love it because you've got like you've got the dodo bird career like I do, where I'm like, oh, let's do this, let's try that. When you talk about hostage negotiation, though, I think it's very interesting because there's so many ways that you can apply that in life and through coaching. And I guess one of the things that I wanted to talk about is how, when you're going through that training and how you're going through the process of those negotiations, adapting to a person and diving into their personality to really get the response and the desired result that you want from them. What's your process through that? I mean, I feel like you could apply that to anything, but in this particular scenario, how would you do that?
You can apply it to anything. And yeah, I mean, you're negotiating with somebody who obviously is more than likely having the worst day of their life. I mean, when your house is surrounded by the police and you're talking to me, yeah, you're probably not having a good day. But there were so many times where we had no idea why we were there, what precipitated this. And I'll never forget when we were first started training, they gave us a formula, and I'm going to try to remember. The formula was 73855, and it had to do with how we communicate with each other. And it said 7% were the words that we used, 38% of it was the tone of voice that we used with those words, and then 55% of how we communicate is our body language and our facial expressions. So if you think about us as negotiators, I mean, when you got a guy who's barricaded with a gun and stuff like, we're not in the room with the guy. We could be blocks away on the phone talking. So we don't have that 55%. We don't, I mean, I can't see, if I was negotiating with you and I said something, I couldn't see you kind of roll your eyes. Oh, what an idiot. I can't believe he said that. So we had to figure things out, certainly by what people were saying, but also what they weren't saying and how they were saying it. And I think the overarching thing with negotiation, and this is true of any relationship, is that what guides everything is trust.
Mhm.
Do I trust you? And we would spend sometimes hours over here talking about one thing when the real reason we were there was over here, but the person didn't trust us enough. We hadn't built up, we used to use what we call tactical empathy. Help me understand where you're coming from. Help me to understand what got us to this point. Not necessarily agree with you. I mean, if I'm negotiating with somebody who's just murdered three people, I'm not going to say, oh, yeah, what you did was fine, but help me to understand that. And one of the ways we did that was with how and what questions. We tried to stay away from why questions because why sounds, well, accusatory. Well, Wendy,
Mhm.
why did you do that? Ooh, wait a minute. Is he accusing me of something? Is he questioning me? How and what? I can get to the same question. What got us to this point, Wendy? That's a lot softer than why did you do that? And
Mhm.
so we would use how and what questions because how and what questions engage you to help me get you out safely. I mean, you may say something and I would say, well, how am I supposed to do that? And basically, I just threw the ball back into your court without you even realizing it. Well, oh, how's he supposed to? Yeah. So now you're engaged in helping me get out. So those are those are just a few of the things that we used to use.
No, I think they're great. I think, looking at that from like a leadership and a management perspective, we're all not hostage negotiators, but we all work with employees and we all work with teams. And so, in getting through the process of getting to the end result, which is either, revenue generation or just a good process flow, I think that the words matter. I think that, words by definition, have so much power in them. And so, learning the right words and the right tactics to making sure that you're speaking and presenting yourself in a way that's not I guess overly ambitious of control so that you can get that kind of response, I think is really interesting.
It is, and I guess one of the things I left out is the listening part of it. I mean, if we got somebody out, we were all, oh, great job, you talked the person out. No, what we really did was listen the
Mhm.
person out. And I think that's an incredibly important thing to understand because there's a difference between listening to respond and listening to understand. And I think some of the best salespeople in the world are not necessarily the best talkers, they're the best listeners. Listening for certainly what you're saying, but also what you aren't saying. And so, if you're talking and I'm like, "Oh, all right, Wendy, hurry up, say what you're going to say because I want to get my 2 cents in." That's listening to respond versus, "Okay, Wendy, I hear what you're saying. I may agree with you, I may not agree with you, but help me to understand where you're coming from." Again, that's building trust, that's building empathy, and you're much more willing to work with somebody who, "Oh, yeah, Terry gets me." And he
Mhm.
gets me because he's asking me how and what questions. He's using tactical empathy. Help me to understand where you're coming from. Oh, he cares about where I'm coming from. He cares what my problems are. And if you can get people in business to tell you their problems, then you can use your product, your service, whatever it is, to help them alleviate their problems. It's just getting the people to tell you what's on their mind.
It's like the hidden why almost, like,
Yeah,
why are we here? Like,
yeah,
let's talk about
exactly.
these things. Yeah, no, that's an interesting perspective for sure. I think you're absolutely on the money on that one. You've taken a lot of personal coaching, life coaching, that direction. Am I correct in that? Um,
Uh, More athletic coaching, but yes, some life coaching and things like that.
oh, so please tell me you're currently working with Russell Wilson and the entire Denver Broncos because I feel like we need a little bit of that love right now.
I wish I don't know if I could do any good there. I love Russell Wilson. Think he's a great guy. I just don't know he's the right quarterback for the Broncos.
Okay,
So
that's fair. That's fair. I get accused sometimes of positive optimism or toxic optimism. So one of the things that I was curious about, especially with everything that you've been through and the cancer, we could talk about, the stages of cancer and learning about it and overcoming it. But what I'm curious about is that will and that drive to really hold on to positivity, to really stay on the upside. How did you find that within yourself? And how do you help coach people to stay there?
that's a great question. I think for me, it really goes back to team sports. And for me, it was sports. I think it can be whatever team you're on. And we're all on, whether we think about it or not, we're all on different teams, our team family, our business associates, things like that, our church people, whatever team that is. So I started playing basketball when I was 9 years old and played all the way up until I graduated from college when I was 21. And I think one of the important things I learned as a team member is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. So when I got cancer, I'm certain I went through all the stages that we would associate with grief. First it was denial, and then I got mad, and then I was bargaining with God, and then I got down, and then I just got to a point where this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck, for lack of a better word. I do not like the cards that I have been dealt, but I'm going to have to play these cards to the best of my ability. And I go to the hospital, I go to Anschutz every 3 weeks. And first thing I do is have blood work. And I always get there early. I'm there at 6 in the morning, and I'm talking to the receptionist, and she's a young lady. And she's like, you're always so positive. You always ask me about my weekend. You always ask me, how things are going and what my plans are and stuff like that. I said, is that out of the normal for you? And she said, oh yeah. She said, so many people come in here and they're mad at me and they bark at me and they do things like that. And I asked her, I said, do you know why that is? She's like, well, no. I said, well, put yourself in their shoes. They're scared, they're anxious, they're nervous. They're going to get blood work, and then they're going to see a doctor who might tell them, you're going to have chemotherapy, or there's nothing more we can do for you. You go home and die, or you're going to go to hospice care or whatever. I said, they're scared. I said, which makes a unique opportunity for you to be able to put positivity, motivation, love, kindness back into their lives and make them feel better. And you could tell that, the light bulb went on. It was like, I never thought about that. I'm just looking at how they're presenting to me. They're being mean to me. Why are they being mean to me? It has nothing to do with you. They'd be mean to me if I was sitting behind that counter.
True.
It's just, what opportunity do you have? And
Mhm.
so I made a decision very early on in cancer. I'm not going to take this out on anybody who's trying to help me, on a doctor, on a nurse, on a therapist, on a technician. It's not their fault I got cancer. So I just try to, I mean, don't get me wrong. There are days when I cry, when I feel sorry for myself, when I get down, but I just try as best I can to remain as positive as I can. And I think you get what you put out there in the world. If you're looking for negativity, you'll find negativity. If you're looking for positivity and goodness and kindness, you'll find that as well.
Very true. Very true. And when you're looking, I mean, so I had a few thoughts while you were talking. One, the correlation between having cancer and drug addiction, because you're both in a situation where it is a lot about the mental thought process and how your perspective can cure or help you through that process. Um, but also it's almost like you have to relinquish that control and that ability to like you almost have to give it up to God in order to make it through something like that, in order to just have the faith to get you to that next step.
I,
um
I would agree with that. And I can talk to that a little bit because one of the other jobs I had as a police officer was I was an undercover drug investigator. Believe it or not, at 6'8", everybody laughs at
I
that.
know, how do
It's
you
like, really,
hide?
6'8"?
Where are
How
you
could you
ducking in the
possibly
shadows?
invest? But I did a podcast with two cadets at the Air Force Academy, and we were talking about the me being a drug cop, and they asked me, are there programs out there? Are there services for people with addiction? And I said, absolutely. There's all kinds of different services, inpatient, outpatient, things like that. I said, but there's those work when you hit rock bottom. You have to get to that point. And I've seen it. Someone will go up in front of a judge, like, do you want treatment? Oh, yeah, sure, judge. I want treatment because I don't want to go to jail, but I
Hmm.
really don't want treatment. I
Right.
really don't want this to stop because I haven't hit rock bottom. But what I told them was there's a very fine line between rock bottom and dead. And people, a lot of people don't make that. A lot of people never hit rock bottom. They hit dead.
Hmm.
And so you've got to, you're absolutely right. You can't do it by yourself. If you're in the grips of addiction, you need help, but you don't want help because you know this life. And I've seen what people will do for a crack rock and cocaine and things like that. They'll sell themselves, they'll sell their bodies, they'll sell their friends, they'll sell their kids.
Hmm.
And it's so ugly, that life that is so ugly, but they can't get out of it because they haven't hit rock bottom yet. So you need help, and you need help that's, I think, much bigger than anything humans can get. You definitely, at least I have, I needed the faith in God to get through my cancer journey.
Hmm. Can I ask you a political question? It's
You can ask me.
moderately political, but you have such a unique experience that I feel like if I don't ask you, I've done myself a disservice. So you look at the problem in Denver where we've got so many homeless people. And most of those homeless people are not in shelters because they don't want to give up their drugs, right? It's one of the conditions of going in. So by providing them with housing kind of without any structure, do you think that will work or do you think that's creating a bigger problem?
Unfortunately, I think it's creating a bigger problem. I have a good friend of mine who has worked in the homeless shelters, and people that are not mentally ill and people that are not drug addicted, there's all kinds of services to help those people, get a house or get housing in some way to get them off the street and to try to find employment and things like that. It's the drug addiction, it's the mental illness. Those people, and even 20 years ago when I was a cop in Cincinnati, Ohio, it was the same issue. You need to go to a shelter. Well, the shelter wouldn't take them because you're on drugs and you're going to fight everybody in the shelter. You're going to steal from people in the shelter. So you're not a candidate to be in the shelter. So you can't go to the shelter. So I just don't. We've got to get these people the services they need in addition to getting them off the streets. And it's a. I mean, let's face it. If it was an easy solve, we would have solved it by now.
Sure.
This is just something that is so. And again, I think it's the mental illness, it's the addiction. And I used to say this in law enforcement: we would not need nearly as many police officers, sheriffs, things like that, if there wasn't drugs and alcohol, because 90% of what we dealt with, directly or indirectly, stemmed from addiction or mental illness in some way.
Do you think that we do a disservice to our children by not teaching them mental strength and really how to develop some kind of mental resiliency in early education? It seems like
Absolutely.
I mean we do a lot of things, but we don't do that.
We don't, but we sort of do. We just don't let it. We don't let it happen. And I say that because yes, and I think kids today, and I have a young daughter. A lot of kids today are soft. And it's like, well, I have to have safe spaces, and there's a dog that I can pet during final exams because I'm like, a dog, a safe space. I mean, when I was growing up, it's like you either passed or you failed. There was none of this going on. And I think that those characteristics are taught in team sports. In sports, you learn how to be a teammate. You learn how to lose. You learn how to win. You learn how to be coached. You learn all kinds of things. But parents don't allow that. Oh no, you can't talk to my kid that way. You can't yell. I can't yell at your kid. Really? Those are things that you can learn being part of a team. That not everybody gets a trophy. I'll never forget our daughter started YMCA basketball when we lived in Cincinnati, and it was just learn the rules, understand the game. It wasn't about competition. And I remember at the end of the season, the coach was like, "Okay, everybody gather around. It's time to get your trophies." I'm like, "Trophies? What for? What? For showing up? I
Mhm.
should get a trophy. I drove her here every
I know,
day."
right? I pay for the gas.
It's like, why is my kid getting that trophy? Went in the garbage. I'm like, Michaela, you didn't earn that trophy. You don't. You got to understand in life, you don't get things. Well, some people do, but most people don't get things without working for them. You didn't work for this, so I'm sorry that trophy's going in the garbage. Earn something, work for it. It's we live in a society where everybody's special. Everybody gets a trophy. I used to tell my players, I will treat you fairly, but I will not treat you equally because you are not all. My point guard was a terrible shooter. So it was like, hey, your job is to distribute the basketball to the people that can shoot. I don't want you shooting. And you're like, whoa, shooting, that's what basketball is about. No, that's not your skill. You're not good at that.
You're
So,
the runner.
but that's the same thing in business.
Mhm.
If you're not a good salesperson, are you going to stay here or are you going to develop new skills or are you going to move on to something else? But this isn't your forte. And I'm listening right now to a master class by Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx.
Mhm.
And I was just listening to an episode last night, and she talks about, be a little hesitant to hire, but be quick to fire. If things
Mhm.
aren't working out, get the person out of there. But if, make sure you got the right person when you hire them so that maybe at the end you don't have to fire them quickly.
I think that works in relationships too.
Yeah,
Just even in your friend groups, like in your peer groups, like making sure that you have the right people around you is so much more important than I think in my early 20s and 30s than I gave it credit for. But I really think that the people you have around you, you need to be able to remove them as quickly as possible if they're not the right influence, and you need to be able to recognize that. But I think it's difficult, especially for, and I've got two millennial daughters, and I don't know what this generation, the 9-year-olds are right now, but I've got a lot of kids. And I think that there's this inclusion factor, which I agree with. I think we want to welcome everyone and we want to give everyone their time and their energy, but I also feel like you need to be able to separate yourself from the ones that are habitually negative, who are habitually in transience, and you know what I mean? Those people that aren't productively helping your life.
absolutely. If I didn't know you, but I knew the five people you hung around with the most, I could tell you all kinds of stuff about you. What are Wendy's goals? What does Wendy like? What doesn't Wendy like? What is Wendy willing to put up with? And things like that. So yeah, the people we surround ourselves with are critical. If you hang around with people that are smarter than you, that have better goals than you, that are richer than you, you'll become smarter. You'll have better goals. You'll make more money. But
And they
if you
make me
hang
look good.
around with yeah, yeah, but if you hang around with people that are, that it's all about drama, it's all about them. There's all kinds of negativity. I had a woman who I really liked, who started on the clinical trial drug that I'm on now. But we would take the drug at the same time, at the same day, everything. We were at the hospital together. but she was always so negative. She was an energy sucker. She sucked the energy right out of you. And even her sister, who used to drive her to and from her appointments, was like, "You are so negative." And I didn't. I wanted to be a friend to her because she was scared, but I also tried not to hang around with her because she would bring me down.
Hmm.
And during a treatment week, I'm like, I don't need anybody to bring me down. This drug's going to do that just fine by itself. But she ended up passing away. And I think a lot of it had to do with her attitude, not nearly as much as her cancer.
Hmm. I agree with that 100%, mostly because I think that we, not in all cases, but in majorly speaking, we have the ability to heal ourselves, right? It has a lot like it's the plant theory, right? You put a plant in front of you, you talk positive to it, it's going to flourish. If you talk negatively to it, it's going to die. But humans are the same way, especially children, but humans are the same way. And I really feel like holding on to that hope and that positivity and really like trying to find and nurture that no matter the situation can heal so many different things within you, down to your cavities if you let them, just really not doctors are good. Let's not go there. But you know
No,
what
yeah,
I mean? Like
absolutely.
I think it's important. And I think it's unfortunate that there's this push of, okay, you've got something currently wrong with you. We need to give you this, and this is going to fix you. Um, you know, eh, so many mental issues that could just be trained to your point with a little teamwork, with a little uh, attempt at greatness, if you will. So that even just challenges to kind of get you to that next step, I think, really can change your positivity and change your faith in yourself.
It can. And I think one of the problems, though, we're talking about people you surround yourself with. A lot of times those people are family. I mean, it's one thing to get rid of your friends. It's another thing that's like, well, I see Uncle John every weekend when he comes over but I guess my suggestion to that is if Uncle John is one of those negative people that drains the energy out of you, try to avoid him as much as you can and surround yourself with people who do uplift you, who do care about you. And my parents taught us that, when we were growing up, the importance of family, of caring
Mhm.
for each other, of loving each other, of supporting each other. And all my brothers played basketball or sports in college. I've got one brother who played in the NBA. And I think that was a direct result of our parents. I mean, we still get together, we still laugh, we still tell each other lies about growing up and things like that.
Redefine
But
those stories. Yep.
we do. It's like, remember that? No, I don't remember that. Oh yeah, that really happened. And but that's I've got a good base of people around me, friends, family that lift me up when I get into those dark times.
I think it's very important. Family, and I think, there should be training for family too. Like there should be a how to do a family, how to be in a good family. Like I'm Italian, but there's the whole state is related to me. But
Absolutely.
some of it, in some cases, it's like maybe there should be coaching on how to work and communicate within the family structure for the greater good of the entire family. I think that would be helpful for everyone. Just a thought.
It will. I mean, as you know, every family is dysfunctional in some
Of
way,
course.
but it's to the degree and what can you learn from that? So, yeah.
Exactly. So sustainable excellence. Excellence is an interesting word to me because to everyone it means something different. So explain to me what it is that excellence means to you. And then I want to kind of go into your 10 principles because I think I'm really curious and I want to dive in.
Sure. So, yeah, I write this book, Sustainable Excellence, and people always ask me, well, what is excellence? My response is, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know?
Excellent.
You wrote the book.
Good
And I'm
conversation. And we're out.
I don't know what excellence is because I believe excellence, like beauty, is sort of in the eye of the beholder. I
Mhm.
mean, you and I may look at a doctor, we might watch a play, we might go to a sporting event, and you might say, that team, that play, oh, it was excellent. And I might say, yeah, I thought it was good, but I didn't think it was excellent. So I really think you, as a human being, you have to determine what excellence is for you. And for me, it's just something. I think the greatest definition of success that I ever heard in my life, and I think success and excellence can kind of go hand in hand, they're compatible. It is from John Wooden, who was the basketball coach at UCLA when I was growing up. And this was his definition: success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self satisfaction in knowing that you did the best to become the best that you're capable of becoming. So here's this, unbelievably great coach, and his definition of success has nothing to do with winning. It's, did you do your best? If you did your best and you lost on the scoreboard, I still think you're a winner. If you didn't do your best but won on the scoreboard, I'm not so sure you were successful that day. And so you've got to decide, did I give it everything I had? Did I, work towards this sale in business? Did I study hard for this test? Did I, if you can say I did, and I still got a C, well then, you know what? I'm good with that. But if you got an A and you didn't put any effort in, like, no, that's not good.
I'll still
So
take the A.
that's, yeah. So that's excellence. Excellence is you define it. You decide what excellence is. And then how do you sustain excellence? That's, I think, the key. Because I think so many people start down the road toward that goal or climb that mountain and sort of get to the top. And it's like, I've arrived. I've made it. What do? Kind of kick back, put their feet up on the desk, pour themselves a drink, and it's like, I made it. And then 6 months later, boom, somebody passes them up. It's like, wait a minute, what happened? Well, people studied how you got to where you are, and they figured out a better way to do it. So if you want to sustain excellence, you have to constantly innovate. You have to constantly diversify. You have to constantly find other markets to get into for your business. And if you don't do that, you're not going to sustain that excellence. So that's kind of what sustainable excellence, at least to me, means.
That's a nutshell, but I like it. So your 10 principles, let's talk through some of your 10 principles. I don't want you to give away the whole book because I think people should read it. I think personally, I love reading books. I like the old school books. I like to smell them. I like to feel them. I like to go through it. But I think, the Cliff's Notes version really hurt all of us. So let's go through it.
It helped a lot.
It helped. I mean, we're here today. But can you go through your 10 principles and give us some insight onto each of them a little bit?
Sure. I always have to pull them out. So
I forget myself too.
and again, they are, they're not in any order. Number 1 isn't necessarily any more important than number 7, but I just put them this way. So principle 1 is enjoy your life. Principle 2 is most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. Principle 3 is you were born to live an uncommon and extraordinary life. Principle 4, always remain curious and ask questions. Principle 5, you are the person you're looking to become. Principle 6, put your God and your family before everything else. Principle 7, we talked about this a minute ago, be part of something that's bigger than yourself. Principle 8, fail often. I always get brushed back on this one. Fail often, especially when you're young. Principle 9, listen more than you talk. And then principle 10, which probably is the most important one, love is the most important word in any language.
I love all of them. Those are all great. Do you have a favorite? If you were to sit down and you had to pick one, tell me your favorite.
I do. And it's my favorite because unfortunately I've done it so much in my life. And it's the one where most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. I know I've done it. I know I've wanted to do something. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Am I smart enough? Do I have enough information? What will people say about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears and our insecurities. And whenever I talk to groups, especially young people, I always tell them, there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you. Go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
That's harsh, but true. But it closely aligns with imposter syndrome, which I feel like everybody gets a little imposter syndrome all the time. I mean, I know I struggle with it even when I look like I'm on top of the world. There are times where I just don't trust it and I'm not sure where that comes from. But how do you coach through that? How do you coach through imposter syndrome?
It's funny you mentioned that. I did a podcast about 8 months ago with a gentleman who was a former NFL player, National Football League here in the U.S. 6'8", like 310 pounds. His brother is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And we were talking afterwards. And he said, Terry, I was so scared when I started this podcast. He said, I didn't think anybody would care about my story. I didn't think anybody would listen to me. And I was like, Marcus, you've made it to the pinnacle of professional athletics. I mean, how could you not think anybody would believe you? And he was just, I just didn't think, which said to me that, I don't care how great you are, I don't care how important you are. We all have that inadequacies from time to time. We all have that belief that it's not, nobody cares. Nobody cares about my story. And I remember reading an article that said 86% of people believe that they have a book inside, whether it's a memoir or whether it's a fiction book. And yet, less than 1% of those people will ever write that book. What I always tell people is your story matters. I don't care how mundane or blasé you think your life is. I guarantee you there's something about your life that would resonate with another human being, that somebody would learn something from you. And I'll give you a quick story. This was a nurse who takes care of me. And when I first met her, she was already a nurse. She was about 25 years old, and she was precepting. She was learning how to do things on the unit where I get treated. And about 6 months later, she was taking care of me by herself. And she came in and she said, Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I'm a little uncomfortable telling it to you. I didn't know how to respond to that. I'm like, well, I said, well, I'm sure I would enjoy hearing it. I hope you decide you want to tell me. And so for the next couple of hours, she's in and out doing her thing. And then finally comes in, sits down and says, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, she said, I was going to get out of nursing. I had had a good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my mom and dad. I was going to quit nursing. I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, and then I met you. And I see what you go through every day. I mean, 11 and a half year battle. I went back and I read your story. And she said, after I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life had had a positive impact on her. Mm-hmm. Think about that for everybody who's listening to us. Think about somebody who's watching you, whether it's up close or from afar, and is amazed at what you're doing with your life, and you're having a positive influence on that person, and you have no idea that you're doing it. So I would just say, be true to yourself, do what you believe you're supposed to do, find your purpose in life and live it, and be an exemplar for the people around you.
Yes. It's hard to follow that. I mean, it's so big and it isn't at the same time because I feel like it's rude information, but it's also, I mean, I also believe that we're all very connected. Whether, it's above and beyond our community, we are all a community, cohesively. And so to that, our stories are individual to us, but also inherent to everyone else's story too. So I think that tie-in and that bond is essential to our growth, and whether or not others want to hear it, it is something that even by experiencing our stories and our personal lives, it does impact everyone around us because every little nuance is important. Yeah,
And I think COVID taught us that. I think COVID taught us the value of, we need each other. And isolation doesn't do anything. Divorce rates went up, domestic violence rates went up, alcoholism rates went up, drug abuse rates went up during COVID because we weren't together. We weren't connected. We didn't have those people we could fall back on. We weren't with our groups and things like that. So yeah, I think you make a great point, because I think COVID really brought that home for most of us, is that we need each other to be successful in life.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with that. And then looking, I mean, I could spend all day on that actually, but when you look at, all the experiences that you've had, what would you say if you had to pick one experience, one moment that was most impactful to your awareness and awakening to your personal power? What would it be?
Boy, that's a great question. How much time you got?
Yeah, all day. You go right ahead. The podcast is yours. Continue.
I don't know if I can do. I'll give you something that's happened recently that kind of brought that question home to me. About a month ago, I had somebody reach out to me in an email, just a cold email, and said, "Hey, I just listened to your podcast, and it just resonated with me. It just touched me in my heart." And I was like, great. What podcast was it? And he told me. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't remember that podcast. And I went back and looked at it. And it was a podcast that I had done 2.5 years ago that he had found that episode and he had listened to it and it had resonated with him. And I wonder how many people have listened. I mean, I've been so lucky to, I mean, I'm way over 600 podcasts that I've been a guest on. How many people had that same experience but never reached out, never said that made a positive difference in my life, hearing your story, or hearing a story that you told or something like that. So I think, you and I talk and, then we'll put it up on social media and that'll be the end of it. But is it the end of it? Are there people out there that are listening to what you're saying and are like, oh my gosh, Wendy, man, she's great. I love listening to her stuff. She makes me a better person. And they never reach out to you and say, Wendy, I love your podcast and I love what you're doing.
I mean, I'm kind of okay with that. I'd blush. It would be awkward, but it would be appreciated. I mean,
Sure.
I think, it's this opportunity that we have. I'm one of those people that I'm terrible at small talk. I like to get to the deep and I like to get to the heart and I like to really connect and engage with people. And so I think it's important that people understand that it is okay to not be superficial and it is okay to go deep and to really understand one another and understand why we have these moments with each other. To your point, you and I may go our separate ways and never talk again. And I hope that's not true because you've been a great guest. But I think it those moments where you connect with people, and I used to have the flow where you get into the flow with someone and you feel your vibration rise and you feel like you're hitting the same place and you're supposed to be in that moment and everything kind of aligns perfectly. I think those are the most beautiful moments, but we shy away from them. It's almost like the energy is overwhelming, I think. Um,
It is. It's funny. My wife and I used to play this game when she's in the corporate world. And so we would, they'd have a holiday party and we'd go to the holiday party. And I used to tell her, I said, okay, now I'm going to find 5 people that you work with. And at the end of the night, we're going to come back, get in the car. I'm going to tell you all about them, where they went to school, how they met their spouse, how many kids they had, everything like that. And I said, Monday morning, when you go to work, they're going to tell you, and this is going to sound kind of conceited, they're going to tell you what a great guy I am.
mhm,
And they're not going to know one thing about me.
mhm.
And so I would go into the party, I'd find somebody, and I would start, oh hey, how'd you meet Sally or Wendy or whoever, oh I didn't, oh really? Do you have any kids? Yes, we have kids. And I would just ask questions and shut up and let them talk because people are narcissistic. They love talking about themselves, and then they would never, literally never ask me anything. Oh, how did you meet Roberta? Or how many kids do you have? They would never ask me that. And honestly, Wendy, it would work the same. And my wife just gets so furious with
I'm
me.
sure.
We'd get in the car. I'm like, okay, let me tell you about Bob. Let me tell you about Jane. Let me tell And then Monday morning, she'd go in and she'd come home Monday night. It's like, yeah, everybody thinks you're a great guy. I'm like, and what do they know about me? Nothing. Couldn't tell me anything about you.
That's awesome.
But that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about the connection. You're
Right, but
talking
I
about
think it's important though because to highlight that highlights the disconnect that so many people have. I
yeah.
think and people are like, I can't connect with other people. I don't know how to do it. But to your point, it is a matter of listening and asking questions. But yeah,
And we told our daughter that, like, you want to have friends, just ask people about themselves. You don't have to say a word. It's like, I'm an introvert. I don't like talking to people. Just one question and let them talk. And then ask another question. You don't have to be the conversationalist, but everybody will think oh, Michaela's a great friend because she's always there for me and she's always asking me about me. And I love talking about me.
people people are such natural little creatures. Um, So when you look at, kind of developing your story and moving forward, are you looking at creating any more books? Are you podcast master general or what's your future look like for you?
Yeah, I actually am. Sustainable Excellence is a book about success. What I think. And there's a million people out there that are smarter and better than I am that can, you can read a book and tell you the same thing or tell you different things. But I'd like to write another book, and I'm actually working on it right now. I haven't started writing it, but I'm kind of pulling things together about another word that begins with S, and that's significance. Success is what we do for us. Significance is what we do for other people. And I think you can be both. I think you can be successful and significant in your life. But there's just I had a nurse recently that asked me. All my stories are about nurses or
I
basketball. That's
know,
all I
it's
got,
great.
And it's but she asked me. She said, what was it like? I had my foot amputated in 2018. I had my leg amputated in 2020. And she said, what was that like? I said, well, it certainly hasn't been easy. I'm 6'8" tall, so learning to walk again when you're that tall, falling is not an option. So, you get hurt from that height. But what I told her was, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Wendy. That's who everybody who's listening to us really is. And we spend so much time, I got to go to the gym. I've got to get enough rest. I got to eat right. I've got to reduce stress. We work on this body. And that's great. You absolutely should. But what I'm suggesting is maybe spend a little more time each day working on who you are, your heart, your mind, and your soul. We know this body's going to die. We know this body's going to decay, but your heart, your mind, and your soul, I believe those things are eternal and will live on. And I don't think we spend nearly as much time working on them.
Wow. Yes, I agree. I think, that we live in a very superficial world where, everybody's got to have the nails and the Botox and the eyelashes and, it's all about this presentation of a false truth, kind of. But it doesn't talk much and it doesn't leave room for the legacy. And I think legacy is important, especially the older I get. I come from a family where my grandparents left an amazing legacy. I think most of us in the family are just trying to drive towards achieving something near that great. But how would you coach to leaving legacy and people who, I mean, I'm getting up there. We don't need to talk numbers, but like
Oh, I'm
those
way over there compared to you. So
so you think. So, like how do you coach to the younger generations to really help them define and really find their way through their legacy?
So I think there's a great story that I heard. Most of us know about Fred McFeely Rogers, otherwise known as Mr. Rogers, Mr.
Mhm.
Rogers' Neighborhood. And he educated so many people on public television, including me, when I was growing up. So 2003, Fred Rogers dies, and his family is going through his effects, and they find his wallet. And inside his wallet is a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers has written four simple words: life is for service. And I really think that's how you leave a legacy. You serve other people. I just finished reading a great book, big book called Trust Based Leadership. It's about the Marine Corps. And the interesting thing about the United States Marine Corps is 163 of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies are former United States Marines. I say former. Once a Marine, always a
Yeah.
Marine. You're always a Marine, even if
Met a
you're not
couple of
doing
those
that.
guys. Yep.
But 160. So the Marine Corps must have something going right when that many people are running Fortune 500 companies.
Mhm.
And they talk about, leaders eat last. Leaders support their people. Leaders make sure their people have the tools and things they need. Leaders don't micromanage and all those kind of things. And that's what I want to be a leader in life. And there's an entrepreneur by the name of Ed Milet. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but real interesting guy. He talks about the four types of people in the world. And he said the first group are the unmotivated. And he said that's the vast majority of people you'll run into. And then he says the second group are the motivated. It's kind of a low level form of living. It's sort of a carrot and a stick. If I do this, then I will get that. It's a life strictly based on motivation, but it works for a lot of people. And then the next group he talks about are the inspirational people, where the word inspiration comes from two words, in spirit. So if you're an inspirational person, you're moving people with your energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. And whenever I speak, I always ask people, well, okay, show of hands, which group? Nobody is ever in the unmotivated group, but
Of course.
the vast majority of people fit into that group, but nobody's ever unmotivated.
Right.
I want to be an aspirational person. I want to live a life that aspires other people to live a better life themselves.
I love it. I love it. I think if I were to really dive into that, I think when I look at how I present to other people or how I want to present to other people, it really is. I just want to connect with people. I want to feel that energy. Selfishly, I live on that energy, and I feel like the more we do that, the better and higher vibrational we all get. And so it's really it's kind of like the all rising tides lift
Yeah,
all ships.
yeah.
To me, like that's where the energy is. That's where the flow is, and that's where the fun is.
Well,
Um,
people always ask me, how do you want to be remembered? And I always tell them, I want to be remembered, just like you said, as somebody that connected with other people.
mhm.
That's how I want to be. I mean, nobody's going to name a street or a basketball court or anything after me. Nobody's going to remember
I
me
will.
100
I'll do
years.
it. I'll name a basketball
Thank
court
you.
after you.
But that's just it. The connection we make with other people, as you figured out, is so important. And so many people never do it.
Mm, it's hard. It's very hard. When um when you go forward to create your next book and you speak with people, actually no, I'm gonna shelf that question for a second because I want to go back to something else you said.
Sure.
There are so many great leaders that come out of the military service or the military service of days gone by. Um, Going forward, the military's changed a lot, but I think there are some core values, and I think I've had conversations with a number of people over the years about service and conscription and the value of it. What are your thoughts as far as training the leaders of our future through a conscription of a year or two, much like the Israelis do, but getting people involved and then sending them into the world as opposed to just pushing them out and saying best of luck and don't forget to pay your bills.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm sort of old school. I think that would be great. I guess I would even expand it a little more and say, if you don't want to go in the military, well, then do a service project, the Peace Corps or something like that. Get out into the world and serve other people. Realize just how good you have it. I mean, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough. I mean, you have more money than 80% of the people on the planet
Hmm.
do, even if you're in the poverty group here in the United States. We have so much. I haven't had much of a chance to travel around the world, but my wife and my daughter have. And they talk about, actually, let me tell you this story. So my brother is the president of Marist High School, Marist Brother Catholic High School in Chicago. And he's been the principal for 22 years. He's been the president for the last 3 years. So he's probably one of the most tenured people that Marist has in their religious community, in their school community. And the provincial asked him to go to Guatemala and to review the school, the high school in Guatemala. And he was like, Guatemala, I don't know, kind of third world country, not real stable government. I don't know if that's a good, but he agreed to do it. And he said, we land in the airport. There's armed guards all over the airport with AK-47s. He said, we get in basically a convoy, an armed convoy to go to the Marist compound. He said, we pass all these businesses that have armed guards out in front. And he said, we get to the compound and then spend the night. Next morning, we go up into the mountains to the Marist High School. And he said, I'm talking to the principal. And he said, I'm curious, how do you handle, bullying and fighting and, racial issues and all that kind of stuff? The principal looked at him like, what are you talking about? He said, well, how do you handle those things? How do you handle, bullying and fighting and race issues? And he's like, we don't, we don't have those issues here. He said, these kids live in houses with dirt huts. They don't have running water or toilets in their house. They come to school in the morning and then they're out in the fields in the afternoon picking whatever crop their family is raising. He said these kids realize that an education is their way out of poverty. So we don't have all the things that we have in the that you have in the United States here in Guatemala, because these kids realize it's either I get an education and I further my family's financial situation, or I perpetuate the cycle. I'm going to live
Hmm.
in a dirt hut, and raise kids, and we have no running water or electricity. It's like, no, these kids understand the value. We have so much here in the United States,
Hmm.
and we don't realize what we've had because we don't have anything to compare it to. Go to Guatemala and see what those kids live like, and tell me you don't have it great here in whatever high school you go to in this country.
Well, I think that's fair. I think kids I feel really poorly for the kids today. They have such amazing tools in front of them and they're presented with such crap. So, you've got these filters, you've got, these influencers, you've got all these people that are showing them and telling them who to be and how to be, but they're not living in their moment. And I feel like there's a disservice to them in that. But to your point, yes, we are gifted with so much amazing opportunity here that we just don't even recognize. I think, again, to the point of, sometimes it's hard to look outside of yourself and see what's out there and embrace what's out there.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm, so many things. I feel like we have 4 or 5 other podcasts that we could take deep dives on.
Sounds good to me.
So I definitely want to bring you back, and I definitely want to talk because you're such a great speaker, and you've got so much depth to you, and so many experiences that bring validity to a lot of the thought processes and the conversations that I really value. So I thank you for that. But is there anything, actually, let me ask you 2 more questions. Uh, what would you tell if you had 3 things to tell someone coming up and into adulthood today? What are the 3 things you would tell them to inspire them to be better humans going forward?
That's a great question. I guess I would say Viktor Frankl, who was a concentration camp survivor in World War II, wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about in that book, that we all have a purpose in life and we have a moral obligation to find that purpose and to live it. And so I would say, firstly, find your purpose in life. And the next question, well, how do you do that? Understand what your unique gifts and talents are and try things. There's no such thing as a perfect job. And again, we talk about purpose in the singular, that we have a purpose in life. My experience in my life has been I've had purposes, plural,
Mhm.
where, when I was young, it was athletics. Then I got into law enforcement, felt that was my purpose. And now that I'm coming into my life, I think my purpose has changed again. And it would be great if our purpose could align with our job or our occupation, but it doesn't have to. I mean, your job could be over here, it's what you do to pay the bills, but your purpose is I'm going to be a podcast host, or I'm going to be an artist, or I'm going to be an activist, or whatever you feel in your heart you're supposed to be. So I'd say number one, find your purpose. I'd say number one, be part of something that's bigger than you, whatever that ends up being. And I would say number three, realize that what you put into this world is what you're going to get back. So if you put love and goodness and caring back into the world, you're going to get that back. If you're mean and bullying and taking advantage of people, you're going to get that back as well. So I could probably list 50 other things, but those are the three that I'll give you for right
We'll get
now.
to those in the
Ask me on
next
another
podcast.
podcast, I'll give you
I
three
know.
more.
Exactly. And then one of my favorite questions, I actually got trained on this when I was doing sales. One of my managers said, ask this every time. It's going to clear the path to everything. Is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have?
That's a great question.
I know, right? I love that one.
I'll leave you with another story. So when I was young, I loved Westerns, actually still do. And my mom and dad used to let me stay up late and watch, Gunsmoke and Bonanza. And my favorite was Wild Wild West. And I'm sure your younger audience is like, what is he talking about? I've never heard of these. So
TMC reruns. Go
1993.
check them out.
Yeah, exactly. They're very good. Good, wholesome family entertainment. 1993, the movie Tombstone came
Mhm.
out. You very well may have seen it. It starred Val Kilmer as a man by the name of John Doc Holliday and Kurt Russell as a man by the name of Wyatt Earp. Now, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp are two living, breathing human beings who walked on the face of the earth. They're not made up characters just for the movie. And Doc was called Doc because he was a dentist by trade, but pretty much Doc Holliday was a gunslinger and a card shark. And Wyatt Earp had been some form of a lawman almost his entire life. And somehow these two men from opposite backgrounds come together and form this very close friendship. And at the end of the movie, Doc Holliday is dying at a sanitarium in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. And the real Doc Holliday died at that sanitarium, and he's buried in the Glenwood Springs Cemetery. And Wyatt, at this point in his life, is destitute. He has no money, he has no job, he has no prospects for a job. So every day he comes to play cards with Doc, and the two men pass the time that way. And in this almost last scene in the movie, they're talking about what they want out of life. The doc says, when I was younger, I was in love with my cousin, but she joined a convent over the affair. And then he looks at Wyatt and he says, what about you, Wyatt? What do you want? And Wyatt kind of nonchalantly says, I just want to lead a normal life. And Doc looks at him and says, there's no normal, there's just life, and get on with living yours. Wendy, you and I probably know people who are sitting out there listening to us and say, well, when this happens, I'll have a normal life. Or when this occurs, I'll have a successful life. Or when that happens, I'll have a significant life. What I'd like to leave your audience with is this. Don't wait. Don't wait for life to come to you. Get out there, find the reason you were put on the face of this earth, use your unique gifts and talents, and live that reason. Because if you do, at the end of your life, I'm going to promise you two things. Number one, you're going to be a whole lot happier. And number two, you're going to have a whole lot more peace in your heart.
I love it. I love all of it. So one more time, it's sustainable excellence, 10 principles to, and I have to read my notes here.
Leading your uncommon and extraordinary life.
Well done. Thank you. Yes. And you can find that wherever you get your books, but I found it on Amazon. So we'll put that link in the show notes and I'll put all of your social links and everything in the show notes as well. How else should people find you? Where should they find you?
Yeah, I have a blog called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day. On Mondays, I put up the Monday morning motivational message. You can leave me a message. You can actually get access to the book and my social media links. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Perfect. I love it. Well, thank you, Terry. You have been amazing. And we are going to have 3 or 4 more podcasts where I dive into some of these great stories you have because you're a wonderful storyteller and I love that best about you. But thank you for sharing all your insights and your honesty. And thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful day. It looks like it's gorgeous outside.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate talking to you.